Hey, what's going on, guys? In 1999, Bandai released the Master Grade DOM. It was a very solid kit for the time, but in recent years has definitely begun showing its age. So after 23 years, Bandai finally decided to give this kit its long overdue upgrade with this, what we'll be calling the Master Grade DOM version 1.5. Despite this Master Grade DOM being a textbook version 1.5, Bandai didn't label it as such. It's really just called the Master Grade DOM. Regardless, it relies heavily on the original 1999 build, but features a host of improvements to get it up to modern standards. As someone that enjoys classic Master Grades, I'm really looking forward to seeing how much Bandai can improve on such an old school kit. So let's jump right in and go over this kit's build. There's a full inner frame here, most of which is pretty sturdy. The engineering was noticeably simple though, probably to accommodate how large some of these armor pieces are. Like these feet, for example. There's ample room here for some engineering, but they're basically just 4 pieces of plastic snapped together. There's absolutely zero moving pistons or openable hatches on this kit too, with this frame instead seeming to focus on stability and good part separation. As for these new version 1.5 pieces, they're mainly used for a few joints on the inner frame. I was expecting some crazy retrofitting, but really, they just outright replaced sections of this frame with pretty generic modern pieces. You know, the hips are now on swivels with that weird tilting feature, there's an improved pop-out for the shoulder, etc. These updates were really simple replacements, so in a weird way, they kind of ended up blending into the original 1999 engineering. For example, this kit still uses the original shoulder frame, which is basically just a single piece sandwiched between 2 domes. Yet it completely reworks the arm below, using just about all new pieces. This should lead to some engineering whiplash, but the new frame is almost as simple as the old one, only using 5 or 6 pieces in total. This build was surprisingly cohesive, and I would often not notice what was modern and what was 25 years old. For reference though, if you're building this kit, every time you use a piece from the T or U runners, it's probably an updated build. Onto this armor. As with most Zeon kits, there are quite a few bad nubs here. These pieces are pretty large after all, so the channels needed in the molding process are pretty thick. It's not as bad as a lot of older kits, but there are some rough nubs on the back of the arm, the inside of the black shoulder armor, and on the legs. I did notice though that they cleaned up pretty well given their size. It must be the more modern plastic Bandai is using, because even with the thickness of these nubs, I don't find them too noticeable. They kind of blend in. The seam lines are similar. There's only one I could find that wasn't masked by a panel line, and that's this seam line running down the back of the leg armor. This is totally to be expected though, as it's on just about every Zeon suit anyway. The only real mandatory fix here is adding a bit of glue to this shoulder armor. See, this black piece slides over this red section, and while it looks fantastic, for some reason there's no locking mechanism. This black armor will slide off all the time, and I'm willing to bet if you skim through this video, you'll find a few shots of it coming off. Not a huge deal though, as a single dab of glue will get the job done. On to the painting, the only section needing some work is this yellow emblem on the chest. It comes as a separate clear piece, which is probably for the best, given grunt suits like this are often used for custom builds. It was really easy to paint up with a Gundam marker, though I will admit my take here probably isn't ideal. A clear yellow probably would have looked better, though I've personally always liked this more flat look. Regardless, if you wanted to go above and beyond here, Bandai did include a channel for the horizontal mark. I bet black would look really good in here. A less mandatory painting location is this blue rim around that yellow emblem. It's molded in the same gray as the armor, and it looks perfectly fine that way. In fact, most modern takes of the DOM have this in gray, including the sample build in the manual. In the anime, however, it's more of a bright blue. Bandai recognized this though, and made this rim a separate piece, so it was a real easy paint job. I just hit it with some Tamiya spray paint I had on hand, and I think it turned out great. It just adds a nice splash of color to all this gray and black. After that, I decided to paint up this mono eye. Like the chest emblem, it's a separate clear piece, this time with a pink hue to it. It looks fantastic right out of the box. However, given I painted the clear chest emblem a flat yellow, I kind of had to paint the mono eye to match. I'm cool with it though, as I've always liked mono eyes to really stand out from the head, and a couple coats from a pink Gundam marker will definitely do that. Lastly, I broke out the black Gundam marker for a couple of these small details on the armor. The channels here aren't deep enough to hold on to panel lining pins, so I decided paint would be a better option. The standout locations are these small details on the rim of the legs, these black lines on the thigh that help mask a seam line, this channel on the side of the foot that creates a separation between the toe and heel, and this black rim around the middle of the shoulder. And with that very basic painting, I think it's time to see how this kit turned out by going over this appearance. Despite the age of the original kit, I found these proportions to fit very well with modern MGs. The edges and curves are very smooth, and I really liked how bulky this leg armor is. The chest and shoulders are quite hefty, fitting of this suit's original anime appearance. I'm a huge fan here, and I'm glad Bandai didn't try to update this kit's original look. Same goes for the colors. Purple can be a bit difficult to work with, but Bandai did a great job with it. It's slightly more saturated than the anime, but still a great hue. I don't see much of a reason to replace it with paint. The black and red blend very well too. They have a nice deep tone to them, so despite having to contrast with this fairly dark purple, they stand out well enough. The panel lines here are also really well implemented. This Dom has some very large armor pieces, so this easily could have been an MG Gelgoog situation, but Bandai was very restrained here. In general, this is a very clean take on the Dom. Like mentioned in the build though, what panel lines are here are kind of shallow, so unless you use paint, you might want to skip most of them anyway. For the decals, Bandai got a little ambitious here and only provided water slides. They're great for higher level builds, as they don't have any film surrounding the decal, but they're a bit overkill for a snap build. I think I would have liked an extra sheet of peel and stick decals. Regardless, I found these decals to be a little bare. While I do like the anime references, with the names of the black tri-stars included, there isn't anything stand out here. It's just your basic caution signs and a few numbers. Now let's really dig in here and see what 23 years of progress can do for this classic Master Grade's articulation. As always, let's start with these feet. Like a lot of older kits, they're just bricks, not even using separate pieces for the heel and toe. This black paint is the only thing separating them. The ankle though is much improved over the original, with a great ball joint at the front. This allows the ankle to hinge backwards for the Dom's iconic hovering pose. On top of that, there's another ball joint that would provide some decent movement if it wasn't for this huge leg armor. It's limited, but not the worst I've seen. Rounding out the lower leg, these vents on the back can move around, though they're hidden in just about every pose. You get a little more than a 90-degree bend from the knee. Nothing impressive, but it's a slight improvement over the original. I don't think Bandai could have gotten much more without a complete redesign. The hips are a pretty massive upgrade though, being a modern swivel on a peg. You get great kicks, but these skirts are just a little too thick for anything amazing. The splits are decent here, and the spins are pretty great, but it's a little more limited than what you'd expect. There's also a sliding mechanism that lets you move the whole leg forward. Usually, I don't find this joint to be too useful, but here, it's a pretty big help for getting these legs in position for a hovering pose. Oh, by the way, there's no attachment point for the action base. You're stuck with that little fork part. The front skirts have a nice flip up to them, but the rest are basically locked in place. I think it's kind of to be expected though, given the Dom's design has this large purple ring around them. In fact, you might not want to move these skirts at all, as they apply pressure to the section above, leading to stress marks like I have here. You do get some good movement from these thrusters though. Each is independent, so you can really emphasize them for a hovering pose. Working our way up, the chest is on a double ball joint, so you get a surprising amount of movement here. Totally unexpected for such a bulky kit. Also, yes, the chest hatch does open up. Onto the shoulders, there's an amazing 90-degree pop out. Great stuff. However, this joint is extremely stiff. It's like this gray square section is too big for its socket, so it never really fits back in correctly. While this could totally be an error on my part, I'm pretty confident that this is an issue with the pieces themselves. I even opened up the chest to confirm, and yeah, this square piece is really just too large. Still, let me know if you have any suggestions in the comments. It's always fun to troubleshoot with you guys. Aside from that strange pop out, you get some minor lateral movement, aided by a swivel in the chest. You also get the usual spins. Just remember to add some glue to this black armor though, as it will slide off on you. Moving down the arm, we get a full spin, a solid 135-degree bend from the elbow, and the wrist are on ball joints. Bandai made a really interesting choice with these hands, deciding to go with emotion manipulators. Each finger is a separate piece with its own joints, so you can put these hands into any position you want. I'm a huge fan of these, but I do have to admit that they can be very finicky. If you don't patiently break in each joint, they will pop out on you. The head here is both great and really limited. You get a ton of movement upwards, and even some minor spins. However, they are blocked by this armor. There is absolutely zero downward movement though, so you're not getting any Katoki poses. I think it's just a quirk of the Dom's design. There's nowhere downwards for the head to really go. This was quickly made up for though by this mono eye. It's a peg connected to a ball joint, allowing for some really great sight lines. It's easy to move too, as the top section of the head is on a poly cap, so it just pops right off. I found myself really enjoying working with this mono eye. All in all, some decent articulation here. The new joints are definitely an improvement. However, given the size of this armor, they can only do so much. Still, these basic poses look great, especially when you factor in these gimmicks. You get some really great options here, so let's run through them. First up is probably the most iconic weapon of the Dom, his Heat Saber. It's quite a bit longer than the usual beam saber, and with this standout yellow, you can score some really great looking action poses. Unlike a lot of old school kits, it also has a peg in the handle, so I didn't have any issues with it. When not in use, you can store it on the back of the suit with this clamp. It's a very sturdy connection, so much so that you can hold the kit upside down and the Heat Saber will stay in place. Next up, we have his giant bazooka. It's fairly large, even by Master Grade standards, just barely fitting on my turntable. It's not the most complex build, but it looks great. I really like the included pink lens for the scope. It adds some nice color to all this gray. Its lens cap though will fall off and go missing. I'm not sure how, but it just vanishes when you aren't looking. Anyway, like with most larger weapons, it's pretty awkward to work with. Despite having two pegs in the handle to choose from, you have to really contort the arm to get him holding it. The stiff shoulder pop out isn't helping either. I found both over and under the shoulder poses to be frustrating to get looking good. His other large weapon, which is another bazooka, has a similar problem, this time with only a single peg. It's just as large, so has all the same frustrations, not to mention its build is even more basic. Regardless, if you're willing to put in some patience, both of these bazookas can look amazing. They add a ton of heft to this silhouette, really amping up an action pose. These are the exact kind of poses I'd want to get from a bulky Zeon suit, so as frustrating as they can be, I do think they're worth the effort. On to some of these additional weapons, he comes with a simple machine gun. This feels a bit like an afterthought, as it's basically just two gray pieces snapped together. You'll often notice it splitting in half, making it look pretty cheap. It doesn't even have pegs. Still, it's a nice inclusion that can add some variety to a pose. Next up, we have his Sturm Faust. They're very basic gray pieces with detachable handles. I usually find myself attaching them to the waist, using their included attachment point. This connection to the waist is definitely secure, but this ring doesn't really lock them in place. They'll almost immediately pop out and end up at a weird angle. You're definitely going to need some glue on these. Alternatively, you could attach these included ammo packs. These are far easier to work with, but they don't look anywhere near as cool as the Sturm Faust. This arsenal is pretty large for a Master Grade, but most of this can be a little difficult to work with. Alright, let's wrap all this up here. As with all these reviews, let's run through those 4 categories, giving each a score from 1 to 5. Then we can tally it all up for an average score. The build was extremely simple, even with its version 1.5 additions. It was honestly hard to tell the difference between the original 1999 engineering and these modern upgrades. Everything just blended together into a very simple, all-around solid build, deserving a 4 out of 5. The appearance is pretty flawless. I really can't find anything to nitpick about. Maybe the water slide decals, but that's totally my personal bias. So let's give this kit's appearance a 5 out of 5. The articulation was fine, with no problem areas. You get some alright crown poses, but nothing innovative. While these modern additions are a marked improvement in some key joints, this is still ultimately a bulky Zeon suit, deserving a 3 out of 5. Really just average stuff. Lastly, the Gimmicks had a lot to offer. Much of his arsenal can be frustrating to work with, but you just can't argue with these results. Having them all loaded up with 2 bazookas, a heat saber, and the Sturmfaust on either side just looks too cool. So let's give this arsenal a 4 out of 5. Tallying all that up and dividing, this Master Grade Dom version 1.5 receives a 4 out of 5, or an 80%. Considering the age of much of this kit, that's a really high score. While I wouldn't say this Dom is a must-buy, I really enjoyed having this kit on my turntable. This is just an overall solid MG, and I would definitely recommend it to builders looking to add to their Xeon collection. And I think that should about do it. If you found this review helpful, feel free to subscribe or follow me on the usual social media sites. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.